to Sandy and Nora's podcast.
Hey, Nora.
Hey, Sandy.
What's up? It's cold.
It's cold. Did you see the news today?
Oh, my gosh. Have y'all seen the news today? I mean, God, there's so many different things we could talk about, but the thing, I'm going to tell you. The thing that is, on my mind is just, sorry, what was it? Yes, ceasefire. Absolutely. There is a ceasefire that has already been broken by Israel. But there is a ceasefire, and this is really important. I think that, as we said last week, so much of the pressure that's been going on all around the world, all of these actions that people have been engaging in, I don't think that ceasefire happens without all of that happening. So if you folks have been involved in that stuff, it really does matter. Yeah, it does. Right. It's really, really important. But in addition to that, the thing that is really just at the top of my mind, at the tip of my lips, tip of my tongue, my lips don't have tips, is have you folks seen this news about this pre-dawn raid of some activists' homes in Toronto? That happened, just a day ago or 2 days ago. Basically, if you've seen, we've seen there's this weird McCarthyist sort of attack on people who are supporting Palestine. And so there was an action at an Indigo store in Toronto where people threw red paint and pasted posters up on the store. And targeting Indigo, of course, because the Indigo CEO, Heather Reisman, is the head of a foundation that encourages people to join the Israeli military who are not from Israel. And so the campaign to target Indigo and to target Heather Reisman has been going on for years, certainly since I was an undergrad, and is a campaign to say, this is a murderous thing. What are you doing? So having a foundation, trying to get people to join this occupation force. And so, of course, as one of the actions of the many actions that have been happening, it's washable red paint and posters. Now, pre-5:30 a.m., a bunch of activists, their homes were the police busted down their doors, broke front doors, raided their homes, arrested people in front of their children. We're going through their possessions and belongings. If you've seen and heard of these sorts of raids happening for drug busts, it's basically the exact same thing that they did to these activists and charged them with mischief over $5,000, which is I don't know what cleaners y'all are employing to get this washable paint off of this glass in downtown Toronto, but you could have just waited for precipitation. It's pretty outrageous, and I think that's kind of what we want to talk about tonight. What is happening? What is happening? What is happening?
You asking me?
Yes, Nora. What the fuck is happening?
You didn't come to hear what we think's happening, did you? Oh, okay, you did. All right. It's funny because we've been, we don't get to see each other, right? A lot of people know this. We record the podcast over the phone, so we don't see each other. We don't get to look at our faces. And so being able to spend, the last couple of hours together in Winnipeg has been wonderful. And the number of times that you have finished a sentence by saying, what is happening? It's been a lot. I think it's been 6 times.
It has.
And I think that captures a quintessential question right now. Because the other thing that both of us have said a lot, and I'm sure you are also thinking this too, is I can't believe this is happening.
Yeah.
You know, like I know that cops are going to do this. We were around the G20. We know that cops raided a gym full of activists and had guns pointed in people's faces as they woke up. We know that this happens.
I mean, I'm literally writing a book about police where, like, today, like, on the plane getting here, I was writing about how police destroy democracy and this is how. And I saw this news when I got off the plane and I was like, how the fuck? I was still somehow, like, just shocked out of myself because it just seems so impossible that that would be allowed. How could that be allowed? Like, I just, you know, I'm a lawyer or something. Not really, but kind of. And, you know, studying this sort of stuff in the States and, like, the bar that the police need to cross in order to do that, like what they need to get in order to do that sort of like a no-knock warrant, what they have to prove. They have to say, this person is a flight risk, they're going to leave, blah, 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 like all sorts of things. And I'm like, I know that couldn't possibly, it couldn't possibly have happened in this case because so many of these activists have been active for a long time and perhaps have been arrested previously for actions. And so how is this allowed, Nora? How is it allowed?
See, you're pulling back the curtain and showing people that we also have doubts. We're also not sure about what's going on. So, you know, it is a really, and this is something that I realized during the G20, actually. Who was in Toronto during the G20? Anyone in this room? Yeah, that was a weird thing, right? That was fucking strange, right? I remember being in the student center at my university, and there was like a guy who had pleats in his golf shirt, and we were like, cop. That guy's a cop. And we called campus security, and we're like, he's not invited. And campus security's like, oh, okay, sure. Yeah, we'll remove him. We're like, see you later, cop. But, you know, we actually saw these undercover police officers all the time. And then the folks, there was, you know, different kinds of organizing that was happening, and the students were a little bit outside. There was the radical organizing and the labor organizing, and they kind of met in some cases, and the students not played both sides, but we were involved with kind of both sides. And the treasurer, secretary, note taker of like the radical group turns out to be a cop, right? I know in Winnipeg, I don't know, anyone here from Winnipeg police cause harm? Yeah. Mm-hmm. I know similar, like there's stories, right? This stuff happens in other cities than just Toronto. Mm-hmm. And even still, it is shocking to know that like literal friends of ours, people we've worked with, had guns pointed in their face this morning or yesterday morning and taken out of bed. Police watched them get dressed. Police took them down to the police station because they painted a fucking Indigo. I mean, it's the fucking worst bookstore in the world anyway. Like, for Christ's sakes, they don't carry my books, so fuck them. You can get it online, though. But, you know, McNally Robinson is where you should be buying all your books, as you all know, right? Yes. And so it is a very much like, this is a new level. Because at least, I mean, what they did during the G20 was not justifiable, and it was bad. People went to jail, right? 5 people did 18 months in jail. Jail, I forget. Prison, jail. Doesn't matter. The provincial one. And it was over conspiracy charges, which is like on paper not putting paint on a fucking building. I mean, They didn't do conspiracy. The whole thing was trumped up. They had to take a plea bargain, whatever. But that was like, okay, I can still see the state logic in this. Here we have a situation where it really is like, what are they do? What the police are just raiding activists now. Mm-hmm. And at the same time that this is happening, we also have the situation at McGill University. Anyone see this? Mm-hmm. Maybe. Mm-hmm. Maybe. Few people. The Student Society has a referendum. In Quebec, tons of decisions have to be made all the time. So they have referenda all the time on lots of stuff. The student fee has to be like re-voted on regularly. And they had this vote on getting the Student Society to call on the university to not invest in and be associated with apartheid states including, and it's not even, they didn't even name Israel, but it's like including what's happening in Palestine or something like this. And the referendum passes, record high turnout, still kind of low. Students are not the best voters, but it was 35%, but it was record high for the McGill Student Society. And it passed at 78.7%. Amazing.
Amazing.
Amazing. And that's years of organizing and work and work. And B'nai B'rith launches an injunction against the ratification of this vote. And a superior court judge grants the injunction. And there's no news about the jurisprudence of the case. No one's alleging that ballots were stuffed. No one's alleging that the society didn't follow their rules. No one's alleging that there was a legal problem. B'nai B'rith says that there's a student, an individual student who's anonymous, who feels attacked by the current campus climate, and that this referendum is part of that attack. If student politics can be the subject of court injunctions because of one student, or 10 students or 100 students feeling uncomfortable by a decision that's been taken, whatever is left of student organizing, which I mean is not in a great state right now, is over. Mm-hmm. And in the case of the McGill Student Society, they are delaying the ratification of this vote until March to respect the injunction. That's a whole academic year. So we're seeing increasing attacks on our democratic processes, our freedom of speech. And the question is like, to what end? To support a country that is doing what is unjustifiable, right? That you can sit there and get really dark in thinking of how horrible this is, or your brain can be a normal brain-ish and go, well, I don't get this. This doesn't make any fucking sense. What the hell's going on?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the thing that's happening at McGill, that has happened at so many institutions, not the injunction part, but the vote part, right? So that's also part of what's really strange about that situation that's like hard to get your head around, or my head around. And then the other thing is the courts. So we talked about the courts, the police, and then we have the media, right? Like if you look up these pre-dawn raids of these activists that have been happening, CP24 reported it in their headline as police conduct raids against hate-motivated attack. Activists who engaged in hate-motivated attack. Not allegedly, not scare quotes. This isn't like, like some white supremacists attacking black people where you have to be really careful, right? And say like, racial issue, right? No, it says that this was a hate-motivated attack. And if you read the articles in not just CP24, but also CTV, they read as though that this is like a conclusion, that this is an anti-Semitic attack by people who hate Jewish people. And of the names of the activists, they name all the activists. They don't name them in alphabetical order or in any order that would make sense, except like the first name that you read is clearly Muslim. And so, we talked last week about how the Maple, which is an online publication, is keeping track of these sorts of things. But it just makes me think about how for so long, what Israel has been doing, this occupation, and what Canada did and is doing, and what the U.S. did and is doing, and so many other places, it relies on silence. They rely heavily on silence. They rely on us not being able to tell each other what is actually going on. They rely on us not being able to communicate with the people who are directly impacted by the impacts of settler colonialism. And they rely on a media that will participate in that silence, that will not platform or report the issues as they are happening, and will instead report what is a sanitized version of whatever events they're talking about that that supports that settler colonial regime. It relies on police who are going to take out people who are going to be a challenge to that norm that's been created, and it relies on the courts to reproduce that and make it legal. And what's happening right now is it is impossible for that silence to continue because so many people are refusing and are finding ways around it. And we're seeing like what happens in silence buck up against like objective reality. I pointed at Nora because we were talking about objective reality earlier. Buck up against objective reality when now everybody knows it. Now everybody knows what that objective reality is. And it doesn't make sense together. And the thing that reveals is that it never fucking made sense. None of it ever made sense. But here we are with the forces of settler colonialism really struggling to try to hang on to all the power that it has to recreate this regime amongst a pretty massive paradigm shift.
Yes, and I'm sure you
So
all...
that's what's happening. I just asked and answered my question.
I'm sure you all know about Arij Al-Kafaji, who was the president of the nursing students in Winnipeg and has been kicked out, I guess, because of having liked Palestinian posts. And Arij
Liked posts.
Right? Arij is not the only person. In fact, this is a majorly growing problem in Canada. And there's been journalists who've been disciplined. We know that CTV is not allowing or has been under allowing journalists from use the word Palestine. We know that in the medical profession especially, so it's not surprising here as someone in nursing, but then there's been lots of doctors who've been kicked out of residencies or whatever. Tarek Loubani, who is known for his humanitarian work, and has done many medicine and humanitarian trips to Gaza. He was just arrested for, and I mean, this is did he do this? Probably not, but whatever. He was at the protest. He was arrested for spraying ketchup on the office of an MP in London, Ontario. Okay, so we can account for these things and we can detail these things, but I think what is so important is this is what state power looks like. Mm-hmm. And usually it's really hidden. Mm-hmm. Usually you have to be doing some seriously fucking intense shit to see it. Or you have to be part of a community that's under tremendous surveillance. I remember being a student activist and one of my friends had a CSIS agent that would call him regularly because his community was under surveillance by CSIS, and it was well known that they were. This was a Muslim community in Mississauga. But most people don't see that. Most people don't think that the government cares very much about what we do. And then all of a sudden when it matters, it becomes really clear. And then people get really scared. So one of the things that I really struggle with, I wrote an article about this conflict at Concordia University in Montreal, where because the student union just wasn't paying attention, Solidarity for Palestinian Human Rights beside a pro-Israel group called Startup Nation had tables booked beside each other. Things were fine for a couple of hours, and then they degenerated, and then there was a mix, a brawl, I guess, between the two sides. And when I was trying to get comment from students from Solidarity for Palestinian Human Rights, SPHR, no one in the group would put their name to it. And as a journalist, I'm like, I mean, I can grant anonymity to a student, but I can't grant anonymity to a group. If you're there as a group, there has to be someone in your group that will put their name to this. And they're like, no, everyone's too afraid. And that's what they want. That's what they want. They like Canadians are naturally afraid all the time, right? We're fucking I don't know what we're afraid of. Groundhog Day is probably actually really freaky, right? Because the shadow is there, right? Or there's no shadow. Okay, we're good. Actually, I don't remember what it is, if it's the good or the bad. If they see the shadow, it doesn't matter, right? Because who the fuck cares? It's February. We're not even close to spring yet. For example, right? But we're very freaked out people. We're I don't know. I'm not scared right now. You're probably not that scared right now.
No.
But I don't know if you're feeling a little scared. You know, classic Tragically Hip song. Yeah, it's a great tune. It's one of the best. But but fear is control. We know that. That's basic. Fear is control. That's not a surprising thing to say. And yet, the real problem is that the way to fight fear is collectivity, doing things together. Mm-hmm. Yes. Mm-hmm. Which they have so fundamentally broken that we really struggle to rebuild the collectivity and the groups and the courage that comes out of being together. And they did it so well that it's like now we're looking back and going, holy fuck, like on the activism, like what even happened in the 2000s? What did we even do in the 2010s? We did Me Too. We did I Don't Know More. You know, there's really interesting and amazing things that have happened in the shadow of this stuff. But by and large, the effort to crush collective organizing in this country has been successful. And the groups that remain pose an existential threat to the continued existence of Canada. Mm-hmm. Right, which is sweet. Right? But what does Israel show us? Israel shows us our reality, but in a pressure cooker. Canada, but like in the size of the fucking island of Montreal. No one in power wants us to see what's happening there.
No, it's like none of this should be allowed to happen. None of it. Nothing about the way that people in Canada have been able to respond to what's happening, have been able to raise their voices, and the way that they've either been ignored by media or completely tamped out, or all of this McCarthyist type of response should be allowed to happen. And yet, you know, people continue to do it, which is really important, and I'm really happy that people are continuing to do it despite all of the fear. But we cannot not acknowledge that fear is having an impact. What it means to me is that like we have to deepen the organizing as much as we can. Like we just have to do more. And that, you know, again, you know, like there's these like two things that are coming together that is really, really tough. You know, people are fearful of losing what they have. You know, like last week, you know, when I did it, if you listened last week, there was like a very ranty part of me that came out. It was like, the worst that could happen is not happening to you. And I was talking directly to politicians in particular with that, when I'm talking about that, because they're like, you know, I'm just so angry at like how, you know, just showing up to a rally or, you know, making a tweet is enough. It's like, what? It's like, yay, that MP, he wrote a tweet. It's like, what? Like they have power. Like there are things they can do, especially, you know, if they're holding the balance of power. But when we're talking about people who don't have the same kind of power, when we're talking about average people, you and me, it's different. It is different. And we can have the same sorts of arguments about like what is risk really when you are living in one of the wealthiest nations in the world and you're able to you know, generally probably you're able to get on by. But I mean, risk is relative and individual too, right? Like you know, I don't know what's happening in your life. You might have a family. You might be in charge of children. You might be in charge of elder care. You might be struggling with something personally, whatever it is, you know, and that's a part of the calculus for everyone. I know that because it's, you know, it's part of the calculus for me. And so like when we are faced with, you know, your livelihood might be taken away, and we're faced with there's an ongoing genocide where a humanitarian pause, whatever the fuck that means, cannot even be respected for within a day, in less than a day, right? Like there's a genocide happening. Our governments are not responding properly, and like liking tweets, liking Instagram posts gets you fired. What world are we living in? Like, this is the reality of our government. And the truth is that this should lay bare for all of us, is that for those of us who've been doing other types of organizing, specifically Indigenous organizing, like Black radical organizing, that sort of stuff has been happening. It is only now being made visible on a broader scale because this movement is so popular that now we're seeing more people who are beyond those movements being impacted in the same way as people who fight for decolonization and people who fight for different types of movements that are really threatening to the state. What we're seeing now is what has always been. It's just that for some of us, it was more invisible than it has than it can be in this moment because, you know, the state has to show its hand. So now what? Right? Like, the government only exists as it does, policing only exists as it does, and, you know, the courts and so on. All of that only exists because of our acquiescence. Like, it's all very shaky, right? Like if there's one thing I learned about the law in law school is like, oh, this is all bullshit. Like, none of it really matters or makes sense unless someone makes it matter and makes it make sense, right? Like, there are ridiculous laws that remain on the books that no one follows and nobody cares. Why? Because, you know, like, we don't respect it, so we don't provide it with, like, our acquiescence, and the state doesn't enforce it because it doesn't care.
Like, horses have to wear diapers in public.
Is that a thing?
I don't know. That was on The Simpsons.
Yeah, sure. Exactly. I mean, in my book, I use some examples about, like, how there's still some laws on the books about how people can't, like, cohabitate if they're not married because it's, like, lewd and what's the word? Lascivious. It's lewd and lascivious, and some of those laws still exist, and nobody cares. Why? Because we don't respect it, and the state doesn't enforce it. And unless there's an acquiescence to these things, right? If there's like a, you know, a secret kind of like handshake somewhere where people are like, yeah, okay, we're gonna make this one matter. Unless we agree, it doesn't actually matter. It's all a very shaky foundation. So what do we do when we're in a place where the state has showed its hand? It's like, this is who we really are. We will come and get you pre-dawn if you if you take some washable paint and to fucking toss it on some glass downtown, we will come and get you. And, like, the apparatus, like our institutions are saying, we will fire you. We will make it so that you cannot, like, feed yourself, feed your family. Like, you can't live your life when you say genocide is bad. It's just like, it's such a mind fuck. But then, like, what do? We have to show, like, it is upon us now, like, to show that we don't agree with this in a reality when we might be scared.
Do you know what my favorite law is?
No.
Did you know that it's illegal to frighten the Queen?
Oh, yeah, I did. You know what? I did know that was your favorite law. I did know that. We've talked about this before, and I'm ashamed that I didn't bring it up.
You can't scare the Queen. I mean,
Yeah.
she's dead, so you literally can't do that. But yeah, that's good news. But
And it's a capital offense, actually.
It's a capital
offense.
That's right.
It's punishable by death in Canada.
Yeah. So don't freak the Queen out. She's also not allowed to take a dump in a toilet that's been used by someone else. So I'm not kidding.
She's not doing that anymore.
She's dead, right? Charles can't take a dump in a toilet that someone else has been in. And so when they come to Canada, they have to, like, build new toilets for them. Anyway, that's true. And thank you to my friend who used to be in the RCMP to tell me all of that, because he did a Queen visit detail many, many years ago, and I got to learn lots of interesting things.
There's a lot that we acquiesce to that we probably shouldn't.
Probably. I mean, we should force that guy to take a dump in the porta potties like everyone else. God, Charles. In Canada, the number of people who've been killed by far-right violence surpasses 20 in the last 6 or 7 years, right? Maybe a couple more years, maybe 8 years. And far-right violence, violent, like murderous violence, not necessarily the other kinds of violences that we might talk about, but far-right violence has been on the increase in this country. And government doesn't care. There's no pre-dawn raids of people that do this stuff. They usually have to turn themselves in, right? I can think of many cases where that was the situation, where the actual murderer. In Quebec City, they arrested a member of the mosque the night of the shooting at the La Grande Mosquée in Sainte-Foy. They arrested him. Or they held someone who was a member of the mosque, and the actual shooter got 40 minutes down the highway before he called 911. And a 911 operator kept him on the line before the police could localize him. So, we're one thing that has been laid bare is the power of the far right in this country and how much the government actually doesn't give a fuck about the rise of the far right. And anyone doing progressive organizing and anti-racist organizing knows that. But to see it so clearly laid bare is really shocking and quite oh my God. And when you were talking, I was thinking about, okay, so we've got Trudeau, who sucks, colossally. He's propped up by Singh, who sucks in a totally different but equal fucking way. And then we got fucking New Eyes Poilievre.
What?
All right? I don't like his eyes, okay? It's put your glasses back on. Right? You don't look good. You look fucking weird, okay? And I don't know if you saw this past week. So there was this guy who was going really fast at the border crossing in Niagara Falls, and there's actually video of it. His car looks like it. Have you seen this?
I haven't seen it. I read the stories. It was a Bentley that was
It was a Bentley that went 200 miles an hour and drifted off.
200 miles an hour.
You have to see the video. You will not believe how fast this car is going. It's like a movie set, and it flies into the sky, almost into heaven, and becomes a star. Right? Explodes, right, and kills 2 people.
Oh my God.
Horrible, but we've got nothing but dark humor, so let's laugh about it. But instantly, Poilievre was terrorism. Right? Yeah. And so I don't know if you saw this, this jousting within the press gallery in Ottawa, where journalists tried to kind of trap the fact that Poilievre was obviously getting his news from Fox News, because that was the only media saying it was terrorism. And Poilievre eats these breakfast as they're trying to challenge him. And he's super smug, and he's just well, didn't you know that Trudeau also said that terrorism was being investigated and all this kind of bullshit. And watching journalists, and this is just one example, it happened yesterday, or 2 days ago, but watching journalists try to contend with Poilievre, for me, is the biggest red flag of what's coming next. No one knows how to deal with these people. And, I was at their convention, kind of. They wouldn't allow me there. I had to look at dead eyes, fucking Sarah fucking Fisher, who's the deadest eyed fucking wench I've ever seen in my life.
Whoa, not wench.
Yeah.
Damn.
I didn't know how sexist I can get, so I'll leave it at wench. She's the director of comms, and made the call that I wasn't allowed into the convention, and I was like, fuck you, I'm going to stand here and make your life awkward, which I did for 2 hours or 3 hours, or maybe it was 4 hours. But, in that experience, I was like, this is the crisis. So we have this increasing state power given through the courts and through police and, thanks to the benevolent liberals. And Poilievre is going to be in power the second Doug Ford fucking croaks or is croaked or whatever. Just because there's not enough people in Ontario and Ottawa. So when someone's in power in Toronto, all the brain people are there and the non-brain people are in Ottawa. And then when the brain people are like, fuck, this is getting bad, they move to Ottawa, and then there's jobs and the non-brain people go to Toronto. That's how it actually works. That's how Canada is run, by the way. It's why Toronto matters, is where the brain people are. And And so the second that the brain people all abandon Ford, which they're on their way to joining Poilievre, that's when he's going to win. And in that is really, I think, like when Poilievre has these powers, we won't be going, what? We'll be going, oh my God.
Yeah. Yeah, so that's not good.
Did you want to end on that note?
No. I do want to talk about like one other thing that like you kind of mentioned a little bit. It's the like who benefits the most from all of this. And you might think Israel, but it's not. Like Israel doesn't really benefit from some activists like being arrested in a pre-dawn raid in Toronto. It doesn't really. Like maybe in the long term if people are too scared to do anything, but I'm telling you they've lost that battle. People will continue to be out on the streets 100%. I have we're not going back to that silent place that has we're not going back to that silent place that allowed for the paltry bullshit media and the way that we have been not engaging in this issue that we are a part of here in Canada. No, we're not going back there. But who benefits the most is actually white supremacist organizing from all of this. Like because there is a rise in anti-Semitism that has been happening, but it's not from where the media is saying that it's coming from, or from where some of this stuff that we're seeing online, this McCarthyist stuff that we're seeing. It's not from that. It's from concerted white supremacist organizing that has been organizing against Indigenous communities, racialized communities, and Jewish communities, and they've been like unbelievably successful over the last 15 to 20 years at making their cause no longer fringe. Like they've been able to make it more mainstream. And when they act, we don't see the kind of fervor from the state that we're seeing right now, trying to tamp down on what is a threat to the state. And that is a big problem because it lets them off the hook. They get to continue to do what they're doing, and then we don't get to organize effectively against that. And that, like, if I'm going to be admitting to be afraid of anything, it's that. That's what I'm really, really fearful of.
The power that we do have is so obvious. I know that folks, like, okay, people listening to the podcast, it's Tuesday, I get it. Tomorrow, which is not tomorrow on the podcast, on Saturday, there's a rally, and I assume many of you will be out in the streets of Winnipeg and all across Canada, again, showing solidarity with folks in Palestine. And that is where the hope is. The hope is also in the message that we're hearing from politicians, that they know what we care about. Mm-hmm. Right to left, take the political spectrum out of this. People are worried about affordability. People are worried about the cost of food. The people are worried about retirement and really basic things. And we're the ones with the fucking answers to those things. Not Poilievre, not fucking Trudeau. Jagmeet Singh probably doesn't care, right? We're the ones with the answers to these things. And that gives me a ton of hope because we just need to organize. That's all it takes. The problem, of course, that organizing is hard, and that's why we're in these spaces together. Mm-hmm. So I think that is where the hope is, and in that hope, there's joy.
That's better. That's better.